Right, well, it's time for our great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, are you warming to the Tories? Now, as Chancellor Jeremy Hunt revealed his spring budget this week, the Conservatives appear to be narrowing the gap with the Labour Party. Now, according to a poll conducted by Savanta, earlier in the week, Hunt also announced a rescue deal which saved thousands of jobs as the UK arm of the US bank, Silicon Valley Bank, which was sold to the HSBC for £1. Now, that's as Sunak, in the last few weeks, agreed a remarkable deal with the EU on post-Brexit trade rules for Northern Ireland. Then even Tony Blair praised him. He came out from under his rock to come and say something. Meanwhile, it seems the Tory party are making headway with the immigration crisis after striking a deal with France, not to mention the Home Secretary Suella Braverman in Rwanda to reinforce plans to deport illegal migrants over there, where we're going alongside with Mark White is there with her. And the government appear to be getting the job done. They've agreed to pay a deal with the NHS to end the strikes, and the budget also featured pension reforms that aim to help retain GPs in order to tackle the patient backlog. Not happy with the 25%, though, on the business rates, but never mind business tax. But Labour have said that they would reverse these if they came into power and dubbed the move a Tory tax cut for the rich. Critics have said that the Red Wall voters are likely to get behind Labour in the next election as they feel forgotten about in the recent budget, with one poll suggesting all 45 seats could turn red. So, for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, are you warming to the Tories? Joining me is political editor of the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, former MEP and businessman Ben Habib, former Labour Minister for Europe and writer Denis MacShane, and CEO of Competere and former trade advisor to the UK Secretary of State for International Trade, Shanker Singham. Shanker, I'm going to start with you because you're our economics man. Talk to me about the budget then, because a lot of people are saying that Jeremy Hunt's budget was actually good in some respects. Others are saying, the Labour Party say, they'd reverse elements of it. Your overview on it?
Well, thanks, Nana, for having me on. And I think overall, it's a sort of steady as she goes budget. It's a budget that is designed, I think, really to tackle some major problems in the UK economy. We have a very, very high level of debt to GDP. So you want to work on both of those, lowering the debt and increasing the GDP, preferably. They're tackling the fact that a lot of workers who are over 50, which would apply certainly to me, are essentially not returning to the workforce. So one of the things that the lifting of the pension cap is designed to do is to create the incentives for people to actually come back to work. Because if you have no incentive to come back to work, then we're going to lose these people from the workforce, which is what has been happening. There's also some things around, obviously, corporate tax has gone up to 25% from 19%, but you also have increased allowances for companies, which is another problem in terms of incentives that we've seen in the UK in the past. And there are other proposals like investment zones, which are quite similar to the Liz Truss Kwasi Kwarteng proposal for investment zones.
Right. So some of the stuff that's been taken on is similar. I want to bring Denis MacShane in because, Denis, you are Minister for Europe. You were former Minister for Europe. What's your view on it? Because, it seems to be they're catching up with the Labour Party now. Some of those things in the budget seem to be appealing to all the right people.
I think they are, but not quite in that sense. I agree very much with what was just been said. What you sense now is that the adults are back in charge in British politics. We had the 7 years after Brexit with May and Truss and Johnson and Corbyn. The politics of this country is in complete meltdown. Now we've got two sensible leaders. Arguably, you could say that Rishi is nicking Keir's clothes, because what has Keir done? He shut lots and lots of things down. He's got rid of his awkward squad. Now, if Rishi gets lucky this week and Boris Johnson is found guilty by the Stand and the Privileges Committee of the House of Commons, that's game over for Boris. I think Rishi has opened good lines now with the EU, with the Commission. He's broadly accepted their point of view on Northern Ireland and Dublin's point of view. That'll be voted on Wednesday. He's gone off and paid Emmanuel Macron 550 million euros. He needs it for all of his pension reforms. In other words, we're talking common sense politics again. We had a rather boring budget which doesn't frighten the horses in any way at all. And that's Jeremy's job throughout his life. He's always managed decline of the NHS, decline
boring.
of the Foreign Office, but a bit boring.
But he's very boring. Let's bring Ben Habib in. Ben Habib. Ben.
Sorry, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Ben.
Connection.
Yes.
I'm not warming to the Tories at all. I think it was an awful budget. The increase in corporation tax, which took it back to levels we haven't seen for a long time, I think was the single worst move by the government. I don't agree that the offsets that it offered at the same time, relief for investment, will make any difference really to the British economy. 80% of the British economy is services, so it doesn't make the kind of investments that would create the offsets. Taxes are at a 70-year high, post-World War II high, and if you believe that taxes need to be at an optimum level to maximise government take and to engender growth, taxes have to be cut, not put up. So I think what we've seen with this latest budget is more of the same Tory kind of economic management that we've had for 13 years, which is tax us highly and choose how to spend our money. And those 12 zones that the government set up for investment are quite different to the ones proposed by Liz Truss, because Liz Truss was going to engender growth by cutting taxes in those areas. This is actually an £80 million handout to each of the 12 areas. And I think the £6.5 billion handout for childcare is misplaced. What they should be doing is cutting taxes across the board for everyone. The £6.5 billion would have enabled them to do something like a 1.25% cut in the basic rate of tax. And that's what they should have done, rather than trying to micromanage which part of the workforce works. And I also think that the reforms that they made to the pension schemes won't work. The over 50s are not working because they're bemoaning the fact that they can't contribute to their pensions. They're not working for the same reasons that lots of other age groups aren't working. That's because it doesn't pay to work anymore. Tax rates are so high, they have to come down across the board. So I think it was a typical Tory budget. It's not Tory in its traditional sense. It's high taxation, and the choice goes to the government as to how to spend the money. And we're not going to get growth in the economy until the government recognises it has to cut taxes. And without growth, by the way, and this is, I disagree with Shanker on this point as well. Without growth, there's no reduction in debt. In fact, you will never get a reduction in debt.
Yeah.
The only way to get debt under control
Nigel in.
is by growing the economy.
Yeah, okay, let's bring Nigel in. Nigel.
Yeah, far from being a Tory budget, I thought it was rather a Labour one. Aside from abolishing the lifetime pension allowance, which I thought was a slightly odd decision, the rest of the budget seemed to be essentially what Keir Starmer had been calling for. So we had the 2,500 energy price guarantee maintained, freeze on fuel duty, free extra childcare. They even nicked Labour's plan for a Great British Energy Company by announcing Great British Nuclear. So, as I say, aside from the pension allowance, there were all the things that Labour have been calling for. So, as far as warming to the Tories go, I'd have thought people might warm to Labour on the basis of a budget like this.
Well, if they're doing all the stuff that the Labour Party would have done, and people would have gone for the Labour Party, then there's not much in it. Do you think that there is a sea shift there? Do you think feel there's a change and that people are actually warming? Dennis, what do you think? Do you feel that there's...
Not yet. I mean, you look at the polls, the Tories now say no longer have minus 20%. They're minus 18. They're minus 17.
No. It was minus 20 and now it's minus 11.
No, in one poll. Now, look, none of us in this conversation, Nana, are going to get into an argument on polls.
You better not.
Absolutely
You ain't going to win.
So, I think Sunak's calmed a lot of people down. That should be good for Labour. We've just heard Ben, and Ben represents, as it were, the angry part of Britain that's always been permanently dissatisfied for the last 20 years, and he's very angry again.
No, you can't just say that. And Ben, he said you're very angry. You represent the angry part of Britain. Ben.
Oh, I'm not dissatisfied. I'm only dissatisfied because of the trajectory of the economy, the poor state it's in, and the failure of the government to come up with policies that are actually going to put the economy back on its feet again. Remember, national debt is at a post-World War II high. Taxes at a post-World War II high. Inflation at a 40-year high. The net median wage after tax is not much more than what you would earn on benefits.
But
we are
Ben,
relying on a cheap, unskilled labour force to drive the economy. The economy is broken. Public sector is broken.
But
it's
that's not what
being in
Shanker's saying.
opposition for the
Shanker,
sake
you're not
of being
saying
in
that.
opposition.
Shanker, isn't this what we needed, though, in terms of a budget? I mean, that's what Jeremy Hunt seems to think.
Where I agree with that is there does need to be a focus on growth, and we are seeing, policies that are beginning and in the very early stages, I would say, of doing that. So, for example, one of the things that isn't talked about very much in the budget is regulatory review for innovation and creative industries and so forth. And you're going to get a much, much bigger impact on GDP per capita from these microeconomic regulatory reforms. And that is what we need to accelerate. Now, we've had some in the financial services sector. We need to have a lot more and a lot more quickly. I think with regard to GDP on the one hand and debt on the other hand, obviously you have to work on both. GDP per capita in the UK, going back to 2004-05, was around the same level as the US. We were both around.
Well, listen, Shanker, we're running out of time. We are running out of time. Sorry, I had to stop you there.
But my point is that it's widened massively, and
right.
For the last 30 years we've had very sluggish growth, and we do need to focus on these things. But we have to do it in a sensible fashion.
And briefly, are the Tories doing it in a sensible fashion? Yes or no, Shanker?
Well, I'd like to see
yes or no.
the pace increase. I would like to see the pace increase.
Okay.
But I think we've
yes or no,
started that process.
Okay. What about you, Nigel? Briefly, then a yes or no answer. So, do you think people are warming to the Tories? Yes or no?
The answer is no, and it all depends for the election.
No, yes or no? What's wrong with these people? Yes or no? Denis MacShane, yes or no? Are people warming?
Not yet.
And Ben Habib, yes or no? Oh God, Ben's not going to answer. He's not going to.
I'm definitely a no. I'm a no.
Yeah,
I think the Tories are a disaster.
All right. People can't say yes or no. Listen, thank you so much for your thoughts. Political editor of the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, former MEP and businessman Ben Habib, former Labour Minister for Europe, Denis MacShane, and also CEO of Competere and former trade advisor to the United States Trade Representative, Shanker Singham. Thank you, guys.